So we're here today with Professor Sanjay Reddy, who's a professor at the New School for Social Research, and he's also one of our grantees for a really very ambitious project that's titled Economics Value Neutral or Value Entangled. So far as I understand, the idea is to return economics to its origins as a science, if you want to use that word, of moral reasoning. I'll just read a passage here from your proposal. You speak of the necessity of an adequate normative foundation in order to have a coherent approach to applied problems. Have I got that right?
Yes, absolutely.
And what makes you think this is the moment to do this?
Well, Perry, as you know, the world has less faith in the ability of economics to deliver answers to certain questions after the crisis. And one of the things I think that's become apparent to a very broad range of people is that economic issues are much too important to be left to the economists. They are absolutely right about that, in my view. These debates affect their lives in diverse ways, as they are seeing. And therefore there ought to be robust debates. They ought not to be sequestered in academia and confined to very narrow technical points. There ought to be debates about the underlying values which are relevant and which ought to guide economic policy making.
In society as a whole, but you're arguing that those value debates should also happen within academia. Is that right?
Yes. I want to take the discussion a little bit further than that point which I just made, which I think is widely recognized, in that I want to also argue that in order for many of our technical approaches to be coherent and to work, they need to be grounded in an evaluative framework, a set of values or concerns, which are as much as possible made explicit. I think that it's not true that one can engage in what are sometimes called positive or purely descriptive or explanatory exercises concerning the world without having such a scheme of values and valuation. And I think that very often our technical debates run aground because we are not aware of that. So I want to make the claim that in order for economists to do their job well, they ought to be more forthright and more cognizant of the connection between the analytical work which they do and the technical work which they do, and underlying presumptions as to what is valuable and why.
This is a strong position you're taking here. If I understand right, you've come to this position by doing applied work yourself, that this comes from your own experience in debates about applied problems. Was there a particular debate that you were involved in there that really brought this home to you?
Yes, Perry, you're exactly right that I came to this through applied concerns, and in fact a very particular applied problem, which is that of how to estimate or assess the extent of poverty in the world. And in approaching this particular applied problem, I became very aware quite quickly that it is not possible to find a resolution to this problem at a purely technical level, and that any pretense that one can do so is ultimately mistaken and covers up the reality that there are particular evaluative premises which underlie the exercise. If we don't make those evaluative premises explicit, then we very quickly run into confusions, quite a large number of muddles, which, in my view, can only really be gotten out of by making explicit what are the underlying concerns which one has, and in this case, developing a criterion for identifying the poor which corresponds much more meaningfully to those underlying concerns. In my view, not only will that make the resulting exercise one which has more value in terms of interpretation, because it will correspond to something which is meaningful, but it will also make it possible to track the number of poor people across time and across space in a fashion which is much more coherent.
This is really fascinating to me. This is a rather unusual kind of intellectual project to be spanning from sort of concrete applied economics to sort of deep philosophical bases. Most people, I think, do one or the other, okay? Right. And they're not trying to speak both of these languages. That must pose some challenge.
Well, that's an excellent question. I should say that temperamentally, I have always been opposed to the idea that there's something called theory and there's another thing called practice. But I take the view that good theory is theory which illuminates the world, and good theory cannot start from a priori premises which are disconnected from the world. Good theory has to start in part from observation of the world.
Now, you say that this is your preference, that this is your style, this is what suits you. And so I'm looking at your CV, and I'm trying to figure out, this person's had quite a track record here. You started out actually with an applied math degree from Harvard, with physics as your specialty. So you were in fact a mathematician. How did you decide to use that in economics?
Well, Perry, like many young people, I was attracted to the idea that modern economics offers an opportunity to use technical skills which one has developed in the broader public interest. So I was deeply interested in economics and in social science generally, and the idea that mathematics could provide a special avenue for illuminating social reality was, of course, quite exhilarating for me, as it was for many young people, or is for many young people, because it provides the possibility of using one's own talents, such as they may be, toward a broader end, and in ways which are perhaps not immediately obvious to start with.
But then you followed up and you went and you did a master's degree in, if I have this right, in social anthropology at Cambridge.
Yes.
How is that a logical next step?
Well, having taken some courses in economics at Harvard, I was privileged to study with Amartya Sen as an undergraduate, and with other well-known economists at Harvard, some of whom, like Steve Margolin, also had a rather critical point of view on economics. So I really would say, as an undergraduate, even though I didn't formally study economics, got a pretty good sense of what the economic issues in the world were, and how economics as a technical subject was, at least to a degree, disconnected from the economic issues in the world. And I decided that I needed a broader grounding in the social sciences before I could study economics properly. And social anthropology seemed to me to be one of the social sciences with the most integrative, holistic approach. And that is still something which appeals to me greatly. I do believe that economics is a social science, properly speaking. It ought to be one. It ought to learn from the other social sciences.
Now, so would you say that having started as an applied mathematician and then this exposure to social anthropology, that you say you were always interested in economics, so when you did a PhD, it was about bringing these two voices, two very different voices, together and trying to integrate them into one person, yourself? Is that how you understand yourself?
I think that's a fair description. It was not an easy choice for me to go back into studying economics, because I knew that economics training at the doctoral level is quite narrow. But I must tell you that it was nevertheless a shock to me. One of the most traumatic experiences of my life was the first week or two of being a PhD student in economics at Harvard. Not because I couldn't hack the mathematics, which is an idea that people very often have as to why economics is difficult. On the contrary, I found the mathematics rather easy and rather straightforward in many ways, but because the set of presumptions as to what was important and how the analysis should be undertaken were rather alien and alienating to me, coming back to economics from an exposure to a broader social science, which took reality much more seriously.
Well, this sounds like a very interesting life you've had so far, and a very bold and ambitious project that you're embarked in. We're very happy to be supporting that and wish you well in that. And meanwhile, welcome you to our stable of INET economists. Sanjay Reddy.
Thank you.